Hello and welcome to the Employee Advocacy and Influence podcast. My name is Lewis Gray and I'm a marketing manager here at DSMN8. If you've listened to or watched the podcast in the past, you'll notice that we're doing things slightly differently this week because I'm usually joined by my co-host Bradley Keenan, but today I'm flying solo. So Bradley is quite literally sailing around the world at the moment, so he couldn't join us. So we're going to do things slightly differently. But before we get into that and the format of today's episode, we have quite an exciting announcement. So DSMN8 is gearing up to release an employee advocacy benchmark report. Now, if you work in the employee advocacy space or if you've looked into it in the past, you'll know that most benchmark data on employee advocacy is quite old now, with the same quotes and data points being constantly referenced. And, we're guilty of doing this too. A lot of them are no longer relevant. Some of them aren't accurate or fit for purpose anymore. So with this report, we're looking to build an up-to-date and relevant data set, but we do need your help to make it happen. So if you're actively involved in managing an employee advocacy program, or if you're participating in your company's program, we want to hear about your experiences to help shape our research. So we've put a survey together. We'll pull up a QR code on screen now. But for anybody listening or not watching on YouTube, I should say, you can find the link to the survey in the show notes. It takes about 6 to 7 minutes to complete, but as a token of our appreciation, all contributors will receive early access to the report, and you'll even have the opportunity within the survey to submit a quote to be featured in it if you want to. If you don't have 6 to 7 minutes to spare, I totally understand that. I know everybody's super busy, but if you could help spread the word and maybe share that link with anybody that you know who is either an advocate or is managing a program, then we'd really appreciate the support. Obviously, we'll all benefit from this data, especially again, if you are working in the space yourself. So now that that's out of the way, we can get into today's episode. Now, I did say I'd be flying solo for this episode, but that wasn't strictly true, as we do have quite a special guest. Emily Paige Jones recently joined DSMN8 as our Director of Customer Success, and we've basically asked her if she had any burning questions about employee advocacy that she'd like us to address on the podcast. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Emily.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the DSMN8 podcast. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for my incredibly amateur background. Lou tells me that you very much need to earn your stripes and most importantly your mic in this podcast. So yeah, full disclaimer, this is my unofficial debut today. I hope to be a much more permanent fixture moving forward, but we'll have to see how my performance is assessed after today's episode. So really wanted to jump on today to firstly introduce myself. So my name is Emily. I'm often referred to as Em, and I joined the business a couple of months ago as the Director of Customer Success here. And really, I've spent the last few months conducting research into the employee advocacy market and space as a whole, given that this is a relatively new market for me, and really speaking to our prospective customers, speaking to our existing clients, and not only understanding the value proposition of employee advocacy and how it stands to benefit various different departments within an organisation, but also critically understanding what objections we might be facing when we're working with our champions and stakeholders in those pre-sale conversations to get a program like this up and running, but also critically in post-sale conversations as well in customer success, when we're working with customers to expand with new stakeholders and actually drive mass employee participation at scale so that an organisation can really see the benefits of employee advocacy as a whole. And one of those objections that we've been coming up against is this perception that employee advocacy is all about your employees going onto social media and posting the same content all at the same time. And now, obviously, having done the research that I've done, I found that this is absolutely not the case, and actually it's what an employee advocacy program and platform stands to actually reduce and mitigate the risk of, though I think this is something that we need to dig into at a much more granular level. So this is the myth I'd like to debunk today. Does employee advocacy look like spam posting? Over to you, Lou.
Well, firstly, Emily, in terms of how your performance is assessed, I think you've passed with flying colours, and we'll have to have a chat with finance about that microphone. But again, to repeat Emily's FAQ, does employee advocacy look like spam posting? And I guess we need to elaborate a bit on this misconception. So, the misconception is that an employee advocacy program is every employee sharing the exact same thing at more or less the exact same time, which results in the people in your employees' network seeing carbon copies of the same post from tens, hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. Now, I understand why this misconception exists. If you look at explainers of employee advocacy, if you hear people talking about it, the explanation usually revolves around phrases like employees sharing your company content online. So that's the definition that people usually give of employee advocacy. Obviously, this is a very top level explanation because it offers no explanation as to what sharing content online actually means. So the misconception exists because there's never any discussion early doors about technology. Now, I won't lie, what we've discussed can actually happen, and employees can share the same post thousands of times, but only if you're not using the technology required to properly scale an employee advocacy program. So, we've said this a number of times on the podcast, but you are seriously limited to what you can achieve from a program without a dedicated platform in place. We do always say that we try to keep this podcast, platform agnostic, meaning that we won't talk about how great Disseminate as a platform is, but seeing as debunking this misconception requires a discussion about tech, you'll have to forgive me on this occasion. So, firstly, I guess the natural place to start is to think about what it means to ask your employees to share a piece of content. So, this could be a link, an image, a video, you name it. However, whatever they share, no matter the content format, they'll need to add some sort of post caption. So, the post caption is essentially the text to accompany the content as opposed to just sharing the content itself. So, a caption for an image, for example, as opposed to just sharing the image. Without a platform in place, this could go one of two ways. You either provide them with no caption to use when sharing the content, which will probably give your legal team a small heart attack in the process, as you're essentially giving them free reign with what they say about the piece of content in the public domain. Now, I don't doubt that this could work for some organizations, but in regulated industries, for example, this would just never work. Employees wouldn't know what to say. I don't think legal would allow it. In fact, we know from experience that legal teams just generally don't allow it. But obviously, you can see the problems that would arise there. And the second thing that could happen is you provide your employees with the captions used when sharing the content, and then they go and share the exact same social media post. So that's the same content, same caption, total duplicates, but at scale. So whether you're sending, a group of 10 employee advocates an email and you've got a link on there and you're saying, hey, just use this caption when you're sharing it, even if it's only 10 employee advocates, you've then got 10 duplicate posts being shared to social. So this is where technology comes into the fold. And again, I'm going to have to use Disseminate as the example here, but that just means that we can pull up visuals as well for people who are watching on YouTube. And if you're not, don't worry, because this is fairly self-explanatory. So within the Disseminate platform, you curate, or let's just say upload content that you'd like your employees to share. And it's at this stage that you'll turn this piece of content into something that's dynamic. So we'll use a link as the example here. So the content that we want people to share in this example is a link. So you've got a link to the page on your website. And when you're uploading this to the platform or curating it, whatever terminology you want to go with, you're going to be given the option to add multiple link preview images, multiple titles for that link, multiple descriptions, and arguably most importantly, multiple post captions, and that can be as many as you choose. So this means that the same piece of content, and the content being the link, can be shared, but each social media post will be unique. Obviously, there's still a chance that employees will choose the same caption and image, description, etc. when sharing, but I mean, if you imagine it like this, if you only add 5 preview images, 5 captions, and 5 link titles, then that gives you 125 unique variations of that one social media post. So, you can only imagine if you do 10 of each, then those numbers start to go up. And this is what I mean about that content becoming dynamic, essentially. Obviously, there's additional benefits to doing this. Providing multiple post captions, for example, gives every employee the chance to find a caption that they believe suits their tone of voice. But I did find a clip ahead of time where Bradley actually touched on this in a previous episode, and I think he explains it really well. So I'll hand over to him.
Another consideration to make when you're providing unique post captions for different groups of people is to think about the seniority of the people within the organization. So your C suite and your senior level executives probably want to maybe speak, and this is a generalization, of course, but maybe they will speak in a more formal tone than, say, an intern, as an example. And providing unique post captions to certain groups of people within the organization not only stops that the probability that somebody's going to see the same message, but it also means that your CEO isn't sharing the exact same point of view and perspective as a as a junior that's just joined the organization.
Now, obviously, throughout this explanation, I've heavily referenced the Disseminate platform, as I never want to do, but have had to do on this occasion. But these are features that I imagine most employee advocacy platforms will now have. And I imagine if you're listening to this episode that you're maybe in the early stages of exploring the idea of an employee advocacy program. So just make sure that these features are something you're actively looking for when you're selecting a technology vendor. But for the reasons I've just mentioned, it should be clear that this is really a non-negotiable for success with the program. I guess the best way to think about this is to think of the analogy, and I have to give Brad credit for this because he's a massive Star Wars fan. If there's two things Brad is super passionate about, it's employee advocacy and it's Star Wars. And his analogy was the difference between having dynamic content where you're able to curate a post so that it can look unique every time. The difference between that and just giving employees one caption and one post, it's the difference between having an army of Jedi advocating for your organization and an army of stormtroopers. Now, if you're not familiar with what either of those things are, if you're not a big Star Wars fan, then I'd encourage you to watch this episode on YouTube because we've just pulled up a visual. But if you imagine stormtroopers, everybody looks exactly the same. They're carbon copies. Quite literally, they are clones, whereas with the Jedi are, all super unique. So if you think about it like that, then it starts to make sense. And obviously, it's a nod to Star Wars for any Star Wars fans out there as well. But that's it for this episode. Obviously, much shorter than usual, but just a topic that we've wanted to discuss because we have heard it coming up, quite a lot just recently. And obviously, as Emily mentioned at the start of the episode, it's something that she's been hearing from speaking with both clients and, prospective customers and doing her own research as well. So thank you very much for listening. And if you are interested in taking your employee advocacy game to a whole new level, we did recently release a course on employee advocacy. So that's 12 modules covering the ins and outs of the topic with skills assessments, additional resources, and you'll even get a certificate at the end that you can add to your LinkedIn profile if you wish. But the added bonus is you also get a free copy of Bradley's book, Employee Advocacy, 101 Cheat Codes. And that can be an audiobook, PDF, physical copy, whatever you like. No cost associated with it. No cost and no catch, as we always like to say. So we'll drop the link to all of those resources in the show notes below. And again, thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks' time.